Hi, you're watching Reddit Confessions, and what you're about to hear isn't the story of a wedding. It's the unraveling of everything I thought was real. The priest was still clearing his throat when I noticed it. Her hands, not shaking, not clutching flowers too tight, just still, too still, like she wasn't nervous, like she wasn't feeling anything. That's when something inside me, something quiet and old, whispered, "You're alone up here." It wasn't her dress. It wasn't the music. It was her silence. A type of silence that had existed long before we stood there at the altar. I just hadn't heard it until that moment. Everyone in the room thought we were seconds from exchanging vows. What they didn't know was that I was seconds from walking out. But this story didn't start there. It started 47 minutes earlier, in a bathroom stall, with me holding her phone in my shaking hands, reading a message that simply said, "Make sure he signs the documents after. I'll meet you in Tuscany. Love, C." Now, before you call me dramatic, before you say, "Dude, you got cold feet," let me explain something. I wasn't snooping. I didn't go looking for her phone. She left it on the bathroom counter, at a wedding venue, on our wedding day, unlocked, buzzing. I stared at the screen, hoping it was a prank. Maybe a cousin named C. Maybe her lawyer, some prenup thing. But Tuscany? I read the message again. Then I went to the thread. That was my first mistake. The second? Not throwing up on the spot. There were dozens of messages. Not just that morning, months. Plans. Secrets. Photos. Conversations about me, like I was a chess piece. Like I was the predictable, spineless guy she'd string along until everything was lined up. The message that broke me? "He's so passive he won't question anything. I'll smile, say yes, and get what I want. It's easy. It's easy." I couldn't feel my face. I flushed the toilet for cover. My reflection looked like a stranger. I splashed water on my face and tried breathing, but all I could see were the receipts in that message thread. All I could hear was her voice in my head saying, "I just want this wedding to be perfect." Perfect for who? I pocketed the phone. Not to spy. Not for revenge. I didn't even know why. Maybe I just needed proof I wasn't going crazy. I returned to the groom's suite. Smiled like I hadn't just had my reality kicked out from under me. Let my friend adjust my tie. Let my mother straighten my boutonniere. Let everyone believe I was a man about to get married, when in reality, I was a man who just watched the love of his life discuss his downfall like it was part of her itinerary. And then the ceremony began. She walked in. Beautiful. Cold. Like marble. I looked at her and saw a stranger wearing my fiancé's face. You ever see someone smile with just their mouth? That was her. That was Marcy. And as the priest spoke, as he welcomed everyone, my eyes drifted to the front row. Her sister. Her best friend. Both of them smirking. Not smiling, smirking. Like they knew something I didn't. Like this was all just theater, and I was the last fool in the audience. That's when I made the decision. Before she could say "I do," before she could seal the lie and cash out on whatever game she'd built, I stepped back. I looked right at her, right into her eyes, and I said loud enough for everyone to hear, "You already said yes to someone else." She froze. Her mouth dropped open. A woman in the second row gasped so hard she dropped her clutch. I turned, pulled the phone from my pocket, and handed it to her father. Then I walked down the aisle, alone. And the entire room, including Marcy, finally realized who the wedding was really for. Not for us. Not for love. But for leverage. There's this weird moment after a public explosion, a kind of echo that isn't sound, but pressure. I felt it as I walked through the venue doors, down the steps, and into the empty gravel lot where the guest shuttles were parked. I could still hear the muffled chaos inside. People whispering. Someone crying. Maybe her. Maybe not. Honestly, I didn't care anymore. I didn't have a plan. No bags packed. No car waiting. I just started walking. Loafers scraping against the gravel. Jacket button wrong. Hands still trembling. It had taken me years to get to that altar and 27 seconds to destroy it all. And yet, for the first time in 2 years, I could actually breathe. I found a bench behind the venue, where the smokers usually sneak off. It was quiet. Absurdly quiet, considering what I'd just done. I stared at the hills in the distance, wondering if any of this was even real. And then I heard it. The one voice I didn't expect to hear again so soon. "Daniel." She didn't say it like someone chasing a lover who walked out. She said it like a teacher catching a student trying to sneak out the back of detention. I turned slowly. Marcy stood there, still in her wedding dress, heels digging into the gravel, hands on her hips like I was the one who owed her an explanation. "You made a scene," she said flatly. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because I finally understood everything. She wasn't shocked. She wasn't heartbroken. She was inconvenienced. "You were going to leave anyway," I said. "Tuscany, right?" She blinked, just once. "It wasn't what you think. You've been texting someone named C for months, talking about how easy I am, how I'll sign anything. What exactly am I misunderstanding, Marcy?" She stepped forward, not apologetically, but with that same stiff, cold composure she'd walked the aisle with. "You were never supposed to see those messages." I smiled. "And yet I did." She paused, looked past me, then back at me. "You're blowing this up over nothing. You're emotional. You always do this." There it was. "You're emotional." The thing she always said when I tried to talk about my gut instincts, my anxiety, my boundaries. "You're just being sensitive again." Like my feelings were nothing but white noise in her grand plan. "You were going to marry me and leave me immediately." I snapped, standing now, voice shaking. "What part of that is nothing?" Her jaw clenched. "We both knew this wasn't a fairy tale, Daniel. You were comfortable, predictable. I was never going to hurt you. You were going to use me." She didn't deny it. That's what broke me. Not the affair, not the lies, but the quiet confirmation that she had always seen me as less, as weak, as disposable. She crossed her arms and said something I'll never forget. "I picked you because you were safe. I knew you'd never leave. Until now." I just stood there, staring at her, that dress glowing like a lie in the sunlight. I wanted to scream, to ask her why she said yes in the first place. But what came out instead was a whisper. "Who is C?" She didn't flinch. "His name is Corbin. He's someone I actually connect with. Someone she actually connects with." That was it. The final gut punch. I turned and walked away. She didn't stop me. And as I left, I heard her whisper, not to me, but to herself, "This wasn't supposed to happen like this." That part one belief. But it did happen. And it was just the beginning. I didn't go home that day. I couldn't. Home was filled with wedding decorations, stacked gifts we hadn't opened, and a "Congratulations Marcy and Daniel" banner still taped across the living room wall. I imagined walking in and seeing her dress draped over the couch, or worse, finding her there, acting like nothing happened. I couldn't stomach it. So I checked into a motel 5 miles outside town. The kind with flickering hallway lights and vending machines that only accepted exact change. It was pathetic, but it was mine. And for once, I could shut the door without feeling watched. I didn't sleep. I just sat on the edge of the bed staring at that phone. Her phone. I know, I should have turned it off. Or returned it. Or done the mature thing and tossed it out a window. But I didn't. Because I needed to know how deep the betrayal went. Not for revenge. Not to punish her. But to understand what kind of fantasy I'd been living in. And what I found, it wasn't just texts. There were documents. I opened the file manager and found a folder labeled legal. Contracts. Signatures. My name on things I didn't remember agreeing to. The prenuptial agreement, one I thought I read weeks ago, had a completely different clause about shared property. Her version had a red line drawn through the original paragraph. It had been replaced with one that left me with nothing if the marriage lasted fewer than 6 months. 6 months. That explained why she wanted to rush the honeymoon. "Just trust me," she had said. "We'll sort the details later." Now I realized she had a timeline. A carefully orchestrated script. I was just supposed to read my lines, smile for photos, and vanish quietly. I scrolled through PDFs and voice notes. There were voicemails, too. Ones from Corbin. I never listened to them fully, but I remember one line. His voice smooth, confident, like a man who knew he'd already won. "Once he signs off, we can wrap this in Europe. Don't let him stall. He's soft, Mars. Use that. He's soft." They knew I wouldn't fight, that I'd crumble under pressure, hand over papers, and retreat. And the worst part? They were right. I just sat there, head in my hands, trying to figure out how I let it get this far. How I became the guy who ignored every alarm bell, who saw her late nights, her secrecy, her cold detachment, and still said, "She loves me. She's just stressed." I didn't realize I'd dozed off until my phone buzzed in the early morning. Not hers, mine. A text. From a number I didn't recognize. I didn't know what she was planning. "Please call me. Janice." Janice was Marcy's sister. The only one in her family who ever treated me like a human being, not an accessory. I stared at the message for a long time before calling. When she picked up, she didn't even say hello. "She's been planning this for months," Janice said, voice shaking. "She told me it was just to keep things secure, but, Daniel, she never planned to stay married to you. Then why go through with it?" Janice hesitated. "Because the trust fund from your father's estate triggers on legal union." "You didn't know?" "I didn't. I had forgotten all about it. The clause my dad added before he passed, meant as a safety net in case I ever got married. I thought it was sentimental, not literal. It was a fund I'd never touched, never even checked the balance of. I just remembered my father saying, 'You'll know when to use it.' Marcy found out about it before I even remembered it existed." Janice continued. "She figured once you were married, she'd have claimed to joint access. You'd never read the fine print. You'd just trust her. And honestly, you probably would have." I sat there frozen. It wasn't just betrayal. It was fraud. A play for money. Love was never in the equation, only strategy. "She's already trying to spin the story," Janice added. "Telling people you got cold feet, that you humiliated her. But Daniel, I saw her that morning. She wasn't sad. She was celebrating. Champagne with Corbin in the dressing room." That last part broke something in me. Champagne. The morning of our wedding. With another man. I ended the call quietly and just sat there staring at my reflection in the dark motel window, wondering how someone like me, someone soft, someone harmless, ever became a target for that kind of cruelty. But I wasn't going to be soft anymore. I never imagined I'd spend the week after my wedding at a strip mall law office sandwiched between a vape shop and a tax service called Refund Rodeo. But that's exactly where I found myself on Tuesday morning, sleep-deprived, and still wearing the same hoodie I threw on when I walked out of the motel. The receptionist gave me that tight, polite smile people use when they assume you've just come from some personal catastrophe but don't want to ask. I appreciated the silence. I didn't know what I was looking for. I didn't even know how to begin explaining what had happened without sounding like a complete idiot. I just handed over Marcy's phone, the printed-out contracts I'd yanked from her cloud drive, and said, "I think I'm being scammed? Manipulated? I don't even know the right word." The lawyer's name was Morgan. Older guy, maybe in his 60s, with the kind of deadpan expression that told me he'd seen everything and probably filed half of it himself. He read quietly for a long time. Too long. Every time he flipped a page or clicked open another file, my stomach twisted a little tighter. When he finally looked up, he adjusted his glasses and said, "First of all, you're not crazy. Second of all, yes, this is fraud." That word hit me like a slap. He pointed at the prenup. This was altered. Illegally. Look at the electronic signature date versus the document creation. It doesn't match. And these changes? You'd have had to initial them individually. You didn't. I shook my head. "I never saw that version until 2 nights ago." He nodded. "She forged your initials. Sloppy too. The timestamp proves it was modified just 6 days before the wedding, not weeks ago like it should have been." I felt sick. Literally. My vision blurred, and I had to ask for water. While he fetched it, I stared at the page again, that little scribble pretending to be me. I kept wondering how she did it. Was she laughing while she signed it? Was Corbin helping her spell my name right? When Morgan returned, he handed me the water and dropped another bomb. "She also added your name to a joint investment account, one that didn't exist 3 weeks ago. She used your digital identity verification." "What does that mean?" "It means," he said slowly, "she uploaded a photo of your driver's license, answered basic personal security questions, things she probably got from living with you, and effectively created a profile in your name. From a legal standpoint, you now appear as the secondary investor on an account that holds just under $42,000. What? She deposited that amount last week from a third-party crypto wallet. We're trying to trace the origin, but it's already in the wind." "Wait, she deposited the money?" "She did. But now your name's on it, which means if it vanishes, you're responsible." I just sat there. My heart wasn't racing anymore. It had given up. Like my brain had finally short-circuited from too many shocks, and now everything just felt numb. "She used me," I said softly. "She knew exactly how far I'd go to avoid conflict, and she designed the whole thing around it." Morgan nodded, and she almost pulled it off. The rest of the meeting was a blur. Paperwork, legal terms, action steps. But one moment stuck out, something that I hadn't considered until he said it. "You need to be prepared for her next move." "What do you mean?" "If she's this calculating," he said, folding his hands, She's already rewriting the narrative. People like this don't just vanish. They pivot. They frame. She might try to sue. Claim you were the manipulative one. Leak messages out of context. Damage your reputation before you have a chance to defend it. But why? Because it's all about control. If she can't get your money, she'll settle for your peace of mind. That sentence haunted me the whole ride back to the motel. And Morgan was right. Because when I got back, I had dozens of missed calls. My voicemail was full, and someone had tagged me in a private Facebook group, one that used to be filled with photos of wedding prep, dress fittings, and cheesy countdown memes. Now it was filled with comments. Things like, "Wow, can't believe he'd humiliate her like that. She deserves so much better. What kind of man walks out like that with no explanation? He was always emotionally unstable." She told me he had anger issues. Anger issues? The only person I'd ever yelled at in my life was myself, usually in the mirror. And at the bottom of it all, a post from her. Sometimes the person you trust most turns out to be the one who breaks you. "I'm safe. Thank you for the messages. Just trying to heal." It had 1,000 likes. No comments allowed. No mention of the documents. Or Corbin. Or Tuscany. Or the forged signatures. She was playing the victim. And the world, my world, was eating it up. I stared at that Facebook post for what felt like an hour, rereading every carefully chosen word. "She's safe. Trying to heal. Thank you for the messages." It was a masterpiece of manipulation, vague enough to seem sincere, but pointed enough to let everyone know who the supposed villain was. And I was that villain. I clicked the reactions. Familiar names, coworkers, friends, even some of my family, all clicking that supportive little heart under her post. People I'd known for years now saw me through her lens. It didn't matter that I had screenshots, documents, legal proof. She had the narrative. And in today's world, that's all you need. I should have let it go. Walked away, protected my sanity. But I didn't. I reacted. Stupidly. Desperately. I posted a short message of my own in the same group, something like, "There's a reason I left that altar. And if the truth comes out, I hope those of you who jumped to conclusions will remember today." That was it. One sentence. No attacks. No details. Just a line to say I'm not the monster you're painting me as. 5 minutes later, it was deleted. 10 minutes later, I was removed from the group. 15 minutes after that, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Cute attempt. Stay quiet, or you'll regret it." I froze. Then another message, from the same number, almost taunting. "You've always been dramatic. Go ahead. Burn yourself down if you want. She'll be just fine." I didn't need to ask who it was. I knew. Corbin. That was the moment I realized I wasn't dealing with just betrayal anymore. This was control. Power. A game I never even knew I'd been entered into, and I was already 10 moves behind. I felt trapped, backed into a corner. I wasn't a fighter. I was the guy who apologized even when I wasn't wrong, who smoothed things over to keep the peace, who stayed quiet because I was too scared to make noise. But this was different. This was war. I forwarded the messages to Morgan, my lawyer. He responded almost immediately. "Do not reply. We'll log it. If he contacts you again, we press harassment charges." Simple, clean, logical. But none of it stopped the storm that followed. Because Corbin didn't just stop at texts. He reached out to my job. I was called into HR 2 days later. Apparently, an anonymous email accused me of emotional instability, professional boundary issues, and intimidating behavior toward women in the workplace. There was no evidence, just vague allegations and a few cherry-picked photos from my social media to make me look unhinged. One of me crying during a charity event, another of me alone in a bar, staring off camera. Innocent moments, recontextualized with malicious intent. I explained everything. HR listened, nodded sympathetically, promised they'd investigate thoroughly. But the damage was done. My boss started acting colder. Teammates stopped inviting me to meetings. I could feel myself becoming radioactive, not guilty, but tainted. That night, I returned to the motel and found something else. A manila envelope taped to my door. No name, no return address. Inside, a printed photo of me and Marcy from our engagement shoot, her laughing, me looking at her like she was my entire world, and scribbled across the photo in thick black marker. Should have been smarter. I dropped the envelope and staggered back. My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't just emotional anymore. This was physical. Someone had come to where I was staying. Someone wanted me to feel hunted. And it worked. I packed my things and left that night, driving aimlessly until I landed 2 towns over in a tiny Airbnb behind a gas station. It smelled like damp wood and mothballs, but at least it didn't have memories. I unplugged my phone, stayed off social media. For 3 days, I didn't speak to a soul. Then, on the 4th night, I got a knock on the door. And on the other side was the last person I expected to see. Her father. He looked tired, disheveled, like a man who hadn't slept since the wedding. "I know I'm the last person you want to hear from," he said quietly. "But I think you deserve to know the whole story. Because she didn't just manipulate you, Daniel. She's done this before. Twice." At first, I thought I was hallucinating. That's how surreal it felt to see her father standing there on the porch of the Airbnb, beneath a broken porch light, wringing his hands like a man about to confess to a crime. I remember just staring at him. This was the same man who once grilled me for 20 minutes over a barbecue about my 5-year plan. The same man who gave me a handshake so crushing during our engagement dinner, I iced my knuckles after. And now? He looked fragile, like all that performative strength had finally cracked. I didn't invite him in. I just stepped outside and let the screen door shut behind me. We stood there under the buzzing porch light, surrounded by crickets and the distant sound of a highway, while he rocked on his heels and kept muttering, "I should have told you sooner." "Told me what?" I asked. My voice wasn't angry. It was hollow. He took a deep breath. "That you're not the first man she's done this to." I didn't say anything. I just waited. He started pacing. "When Marcy was 22, she got engaged to a guy named Derek. Sweet kid. Quiet. Reminded me of you, honestly. He was in dental school, and she told us she was head over heels for him. We supported it. Paid for the engagement party, the down payment on their apartment. 6 months before the wedding, he found out she was still seeing her ex behind his back. She said it was a mistake, that it was just a goodbye. We believed her. She cried. She made me cry. But then Derek caught her again. And this time, she was stealing from him." He paused, then added, "Thousands. From a shared student loan account. Said she needed it for tuition. She used it for a vacation." I stood still, watching him unravel like a man trying to stop a fire with a teacup. Then there was Jonah. 3 years later. Another guy. Older, divorced. Wealthy. She told him she was in love, made him promise they'd elope. He bought her a car, paid off her credit cards. The night before they flew to Vegas, she disappeared. Took the car. Maxed out the joint cards. Never spoke to him again. "And you didn't tell me any of this," I said, barely keeping my voice from shaking. "I wanted to. I swear I did," he said, eyes wide, desperate now. But she threatened to cut us off. She said if we ever told anyone, she'd lie. Say we were abusive. Say I hid her as a child. Say her mother was emotionally unstable. We're teachers, Daniel. Small town. One accusation like that, and we'd lose everything. I sat down on the porch step because I suddenly felt like my knees might give out. "I knew something was wrong when she got engaged to you," he went on, quieter now. "She was too calm, too cold. I asked her privately why you, and she said," he stopped, choking on the words. "She said, because he's easy. He's the kind of guy who doesn't ask questions." I swallowed hard. The words hit harder than I expected, maybe because they were the same ones I'd seen in her texts. It confirmed what I'd already feared, that I wasn't just a fluke. I was selected for my passivity, for my softness, for my inability to stand up and say, no. I tried to make peace with it, he said. Tried to believe maybe she'd changed. Maybe this time it was real. But when you walked out of that chapel, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. "Relief," I whispered. He nodded. We sat there in silence for a long while. Then he pulled something from his coat pocket, a USB drive. I don't know what's on it exactly, but her laptop backed up to my old computer last Christmas. I found it by accident last week and made a copy. You should have it. Just be careful. I took it, not because I was curious, but because I was tired of being kept in the dark about the life I was almost forced into. After he left, I booted up my laptop and plugged it in. The folders were messy, scattered. There were dozens of documents, resumes she'd faked, bank transfers she'd moved through fake LLCs, even medical invoices under names I didn't recognize. But the worst thing I found was a folder simply labeled, After. Inside were drafts of emails. One titled Press Release, Daniel's Breakdown. Another, Restraining Order Prep. And another, GoFundMe, Starting Over. They were all written before the wedding. Each one painted me as unstable, manipulative, dangerous. Like I had destroyed her life. She was going to leave, but not quietly. She was going to bury me and raise money doing it. Her little army of online supporters? She already had the blueprint in place. Her victimhood was scripted, rehearsed. She hadn't lost control when I left her at the altar. She'd just had to skip ahead a few scenes. And then I realized, this wasn't just betrayal. This wasn't even about me anymore. This was her profession, her performance. And I had been cast as the villain. I didn't sleep that night. I tried, but every time I shut my eyes, I'd see her, not the version I loved, but the version that stared at me across that altar like I was just another item on her checklist. The files on that USB haunted me, especially that folder, after, where she'd practically storyboarded my destruction. I felt like I was in a courtroom where the verdict had already been written and I wasn't invited to testify. By morning, I made up my mind. I was done playing defense. So I did something I hadn't done since the wedding. I opened my laptop, created a burner email, and reached out to someone I'd sworn I'd never contact. Jonah, her ex. I'd found his name in the USB, not in her writing, but in a screenshot of a financial dispute filed through a private arbitrator. Apparently, he'd tried to take legal action after she vanished with the car and drained their joint credit line. He didn't win, but his name and email were buried in the paperwork, and something told me that if anyone could help me piece this all together, it was him. He replied 2 hours later. The message was short, but it hit me like a freight train. Daniel, I've been waiting for this day. You're not alone. Call me. Jay. I called immediately. His voice was sharper than I expected. Not angry, just tired. The way people sound when they've lived with a truth so long it stops stinging. She used me just like she used you, he said. But the worst part? It wasn't just about money. It was about control. She wanted to see how much I would give before I broke. I told him what happened. The texts, the wedding, the forged contracts, the messages from Corbin. He went quiet when I mentioned that last name. Wait, did you say Corbin? He asked. Yeah, tall guy, navy suits, arrogant voice. Says things like easy target and use that. Jesus, Jonah breathed. That's her cousin. My mouth went dry. What? Yeah, I met him once years ago. Marcy said he was her mom's nephew. They weren't close, but he helped her sort things with her business. Back then, I thought he was just managing her freelance gigs or something. But it always felt weird. They were too comfortable. My thoughts began spiraling. Cousin? That would explain the fake names, the transfer accounts. She didn't bring strangers into her cons. She kept it in the family. Tight. Trustworthy. Untraceable. I told Jonah about the GoFundMe drafts, the fake press release, the restraining order letter, all prepared before the wedding. He wasn't surprised. She's been building that pattern for years, he said. You were just the latest chapter. But here's the thing. She always leaves a trace. You just have to know where to look. What kind of trace? She documents everything. Half her scam is in the cover story. She writes scripts, schedules posts, edits photos before uploading. She makes it all look spontaneous, but it's staged months in advance. That's when something clicked. The engagement shoot. There'd been a moment, weeks before the wedding, when Marcy asked to redo a few shots. Just in case, she'd said, we want to create a storyboard for future anniversary stuff. I thought it was weird. Who storyboards their marriage? But I went along with it, like I always did. Now I realized what she was really doing. Creating assets for her future narrative. And if Jonah was right, there were more. Buried somewhere. I opened the cloud storage I used to back up our shared photos. I hadn't touched it since I left her. Thousands of images. Folders. Subfolders. I filtered by date. Then I searched for one specific phrase I remembered she used a lot. Backup _. It was there. A folder named backup_engagement_storyboard_final. Inside were photos that had never been posted. But every file was labeled with captions like happy_Neil_F_years. JPG. Marcy_needs_preview. JPG. Daniel_overreacts_sample_crop. PNG. They weren't just photos. They were tools. Like she'd been preparing a digital scrapbook of our slow collapse before the collapse had even happened. And then I saw it. A folder inside the folder. Labeled timeline_recovery plan_C. It contained spreadsheets, charts, lists of names, IP addresses, email contacts. At the top, A checklist that began with Step 1. Gain legal access to Daniel's trust. Step 2. Secure sympathetic narrative online. Step 3. Exit with financial separation before Q3. And at the bottom? Step 9. Ghost and reset. New target pending. NYC lead, TBD. She already had the next one lined up. I shut the laptop slowly. My fingers went numb. I wasn't even angry anymore. I felt cracked. Not just because of what she did to me, but because of how calmly she did it. How calculated it all was. Like I was just another closed chapter. Another dot on her roadmap to wherever she thought she was going. And then came the final blow. My email pinged. An anonymous message. Enjoy the rabbit hole. Careful how loud you get, Daniel. Not everyone's afraid of lawyers. Attached was a single image. It was me, walking out of the chapel, taken from a distance, from behind a tree. They were still watching. I didn't respond to the photo. I didn't panic. I didn't even flinch. Because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't scared anymore. I was awake. I took everything I had, the forged documents, the email trail, the screenshots, the photos, the GoFundMe drafts, the fake press release, the spreadsheet of her recovery plan, and sent it in a single zip file to 3 places. My lawyer, a journalist friend I'd lost touch with years ago, and the local authorities who'd already opened a quiet investigation based on Morgan's harassment report. But that wasn't all. I also wrote my own story. I posted it, not in the Facebook group she'd banned me from, not in a comment war, but as a clear, factual, time-stamped blog entry with receipts embedded in every paragraph. I kept the tone calm. No name-calling. Just the truth. Verifiable, documentable, and brutal in its clarity. It spread faster than I expected. Within 2 days, the post hit the front page of a local news aggregator. The comments poured in, not just sympathy, but corroboration. Other people, other stories. A woman from New Jersey who said her brother was ghosted after wiring Marcy money. A guy from Denver who shared screenshots of her trying to recruit freelancers for a media scam. Even someone who worked at the same venue where we were supposed to be married, saying she'd overheard Marcy bragging during rehearsal dinner about cashing out early. The web began to collapse. Her carefully constructed narrative unraveled thread by thread, not because I fought louder, but because I stopped hiding. Her smear campaign couldn't survive the light. Corbin went silent. The threatening messages stopped. Her GoFundMe, yes, she launched it anyway, was flagged and removed within 24 hours. Turns out you can't lie about a breakdown when someone's already uploaded your planning spreadsheet to the internet. Then came the most unexpected twist of all. Marcy's father reached out again. But this time, it wasn't to apologize. It was to say she'd turned herself in. Apparently, after realizing how exposed she was, and learning that at least one former victim had filed an interstate complaint, she lawyered up and made a deal. I don't know the exact details, and I don't care. All I know is that there will be consequences now. For her. For him. For the whole web of lies. But that's not what made the ending feel real to me. What made it real was standing outside my old apartment, the one I had once shared with her, watching as a moving truck I paid for rolled away with everything she left behind. I kept nothing. Not the furniture. Not the wedding decor. Not even the bed frame. I didn't want anything touched by that version of my life. Instead, I signed the lease to a new place, smaller, quieter, overlooking a little garden that no one visits. I adopted a rescue dog named Oliver. He's awkward, anxious, drools too much, and always walks into screen doors. He's perfect. And me? I'm okay. I still check the locks too many times. I still second-guess texts before I send them. But I don't apologize for who I am anymore. Not to people who treat empathy like a weakness. I know now that being soft doesn't mean you're stupid. It means you care. And caring doesn't make you a target. It makes you dangerous to people who thrive on deception. Because when you finally speak, you don't yell. You prove. You document. You expose. You endure. So that's my story. Or at least, the part I'm ready to share. Thanks for watching Reddit Confessions. If you've ever experienced something that made you question your reality, a lie you believed, a person who wore a mask, a betrayal you never saw coming, drop your story in the comments. We read every single one. And remember, sometimes, walking away isn't weakness. It's the beginning of your real life.